auditorium, the one we're standing in now, was built in 1928, and it has seen numerous events take place within these walls. Many of those events are associated with music, such as gospel singings. Following World War II, a group called the Chuck Wagon Gang appeared on the stage. Sacred Heart shake note singings and fiddling contests have entertained these walls. In 1944, Betty Teichmiller Royston presented a tap dance right here on the stage for the junior-senior party. In 1960, the town sponsored a talent contest here in the auditorium. The Randolph County String Band that you see on the screen did not place in the competition of singing and playing music, but then Claudine Nobley, the lady sitting there, decided to enter the buck dancing contest, and she won first place. Although she was a little out of breath, she received her trophy and $10 with a big smile. Honeymooners were in this audience that night also in 1960, and that was Gerson and Yvette Bonner. They were in the audience on their honeymoon. A popular high school band called Soul Times 9, and that is the way they spelled the name of their group, was made up of 9 Handley High School student boys. They played on the stage in 1968 with the tunes of Bob Dylan, and again in 1969. They often played for dances at the old National Guard Armory building, which was right out there near the Frosty Pal on the old Lafayette Highway. By the way, they're working on a reunion concert, so I think you'd enjoy it, because I know a lot of you still listen to some of that old 60s and early 70s music, so watch the newspaper. They're going to do a reunion concert soon, maybe by the end of this year. With some of President Roosevelt's WPA funds, a large block gymnasium was built on the corner of West Point and College Streets, and that building had many uses. On the front bottom floor, facing West Point Street, was a library. Children found books like the Bobbsey Twins, with wholesome stories of Flossie and Freddie Bobbsey going on vacations, finding a hollow tree, and even a secret room. The author of the Bobbsey Twins was Laura Lee Hope. That name was actually a pseudonym. For many years, it was written by a man. Nobody knew. Just above the library was a home economics classroom. Francis LeSueur taught home economics for many years at Handley High School. A gym was on the ground level facing College Street. A good-looking, blue-eyed man with a degree from Jackson State University came to teach athletics. His name was Coach Hughley Morris, Jr., and he was a Roanoke boy. Downstairs under the gym was a shop that Tom Ziegler Sr. was the teacher of, but there was also a large swimming pool for lessons and exercise. Around 1947, a horrible accident took place in that swimming pool. When student Milford Hodges, he did not die, he jumped into the pool, but he hit his head, and it paralyzed him from the waist down. He had formed an orchestra prior to that, consisting of several Handley students, and they still travel around and play their music. Band member Itis Hurd recently told me that they just picked Milford up and took him on in wherever they're supposed to play music, and went ahead and carried on with their orchestra and their music. Later, flooring was put down. That pool was never used again after that. And, so maple flooring was put down there, and it was used as a girls' gym for many years. And during the Cold War, and even later, it was considered a fallout shelter. Luther L. James served as superintendent for 38 years. He oversaw the building of the auditorium, the gymnasium, and the Handley Elementary School. He implemented the vocational classes such as home economics, industrial arts, and typing classes. He added football to the sports of Handley High. Aren't we glad? He also added a stadium, and he obtained accreditation for Handley High School. This building was opened in time for the 1963-64 school year and is still in use today. The Carlisle home, which formerly sat on the property, was bought and moved to Albany, Georgia. The new school cost approximately $300,000. The state provided $125,000, and the rest was paid by a 5 mil property tax the voters of Roanoke approved of. Work began on the new school in 1962, which eventually led to the dismantling of the former high school building after 56 years of educating the youth of Roanoke. Handley High School has always loved football. Here is the very first football team dressed out in their new uniforms. The 1940 team went undefeated in the perfect season. And I believe Handley has done that again since then. In that same year, James Carter Wright gave 22 acres to the school for the purpose of athletics. And that's why the football field is called Wright Field. In 1922, Handley added their first baseball team. Here they're shown with Coach Yarber. Others who contribute to the success of Handley High School are janitors, ground workers, maintenance people. And here stands Ethel Gunn and Layman Staples. Mr. Staples called this building his auditorium because he helped lay the brick to build it in 1928. For those of you who might remember Mr. Staples, you remember that he had a bad limp. And he had this limp as a result of helping to carry a piano down the front steps of the auditorium. He was on the lower end, and when the other guy dropped his end, Mr. Staples caught the piano with his body weight. He experienced an injury that caused a limp from then on. But what would a school do without lunchroom workers? You see the hands there of Miss Ruth Watkins, who made yeast rolls for students at least 25 years downstairs in the lunchroom. Ms. Watkins was in the nursing home, trailers, and she passed away about 8 weeks ago. But I got to interview her before she passed away, and she was 95 years old. Bookkeepers like Ms. McKinney, who is still working here. Librarians like Ms. Mary Hooton, and lunchroom managers like Ms. Wadsworth are all a part that is very essential to a good school system. Imagine if we didn't have all the support people. The award-winning Handley Band gained a gym in 1964 when Ronald Height was employed as band director. Under his leadership, Handley was one of the first bands in the South, if not the first band in the South, to adopt the Spanish matador-style uniform and played a lot of Spanish-style music and hits of the day from groups like Chicago. The flag and rifle corps had more visual appeal under Mr. Height, rather than just march and hold them for looks. The drills had motion and the flags had flair. Handley never did away with majorettes, as many bands did during this era. In 1919, the new night-in-low school on the Lowell Mill Village was ready, but the great influenza pandemic was still raging across Lowell and Roanoke, so the school waited until the first of 1920 to open. And we have to talk about night-in-low and one other school, because if you give the history of the Roanoke City school system, it's not just about Handley, because there were two other very popular, very much attended, and very historical schools that were in this town. And you'll see by the end of this, they all came together to be one school. Child labor had been a common tool for cheap and plentiful labor at the Handley Manufacturing Company for the first decade of its existence. It opened in 1901. And records show in our county courthouse that in 1908, 116 children between the ages of 11 and 18 worked in the Handley mill. And in 1908, they didn't work 8-hour shifts like we're used to now. They worked 12-hour shifts. And these children could be paid less, and they were paid 5 cents an hour. But when the school opened in its new building at the foot of Randolph Street, over on the Mill Village, the children came. And they came, and a few more came, and some more came, and the building was completely filled. It was full to capacity on the very first day, over 400 students. In the spring, the school planned a commencement ceremony for the 6th graders, while all of the other children had planned to do skits and songs. So they set up chairs outside. They didn't have a room. They knew that all the meal parents would come to see their children in this commencement. So they set up chairs, all the chairs they had in the school, pulled them outside in front of the school building. Those filled up real quick. So then they found ways to make some sort of makeshift benches. And those benches filled up. So then the mill people began to realize that the town people across the railroad track, they were coming over to see this commencement at their new school. We don't know if it was out of curiosity or they had a genuine interest and wanted to come and see this and applaud these children. And so the mill people dashed from their seats and ran to their houses all over the mill village and brought back chairs, and toting them over their heads or bringing them any way that they could on back of trucks. They brought the chairs in their houses and set those up. And still there was not enough room, so the cars began lining up behind all of these seats. And people were sitting on top of their cars watching these 400 students participate in the very first commencement of Night in Low School. What a great day that would have been to be there. Paternalism by the mill company proved to be beneficial to the recreational opportunities of mill folk and their children. There are several things that were built for the mill village long before the city of Roanoke had them. One of those is the mill built a concrete swimming pool. Later, Roanoke had a city pool close to the Little League field, but the mill company built a swimming pool first. And they also built an auditorium with a movie picture shows, as they called it, on Saturdays. The mill company also built a baseball diamond before the city of Roanoke did. The large field in front of the old Night in Low School is where all those buildings sit now to make up the school. But it was made into a baseball field and they called it the local diamond. Baseball became very popular in Roanoke in the 1920s. The mill company had its own team and they played other surrounding mill teams. Since Handley High School did not have a baseball field, they used the Lowell Diamond as well to play other high schools. In the 1950s, the ladies of the Lowell Study Club, under the leadership of Mrs. L.E. Moore, helped to form a committee to begin serving lunches at the school. Prior to that, the children they left school at lunchtime. Everybody left at the same time. They all went home because they lived within walking distance. And they ate their lunch and they came back to school. They did that here at Handley as well. Soon the mill company supplied the money to build a lunchroom in the school with much urging from the Lowell Study Club ladies. Two of the most beloved Night in Low School teachers were Mrs. Rose Hard and Ms. Myrtle Pinker, who also served as principals of that school. There's lots of stories about Mrs. Rose Hard. Some people say she was a tough old gal, but I loved her. And they talk about her strict discipline, but they had a great deal of respect for her. One of the stories is that her dog came to school with her every day, and he just lay on the front steps all day while she was teaching or being principal. And then she'd get her dog and they'd go home at the end of the day. Also, there was a cellar down the right hallway of Night in Low School, and she kept her flowers there in the wintertime. So it was her school for quite a number of years. As these youngsters grew up and graduated from 6th grade, they crossed the railroad tracks. They entered 7th grade at Handley. For some of them, it was a smooth transition. But for others, it was so difficult that many of them dropped out of school after 6th or 7th grade. In my interviews that I have done with former mill workers and children who grew up in Lowell, it appears to me that the boys had an easier time crossing the tracks and transitioning into this school. I think some of that has to do with they had been in Boy Scouts, they had played sports. They had an easier transition than the girls, it seems. I'll compile data on that later, but I believe that's a fact.